These guys are Mormons. You Mormon? Was? Okay. So we have a Jack Mormon in the back. Anyway, this is what people think about Utah, and the good thing about that is we don't have the bad traffic in Utah that you guys have, because the Mormons scare people away, I think. And this is our place. I'm just going to tell you the shame of self-promotion before we get into the science, but if you come to Utah and you come ski, we're 30 minutes from Salt Lake Airport, so if you go to Denver and you drive a brutal hour and a half to Vail, you can drive an easy 30 minutes to Park City being skiing. And this is our restaurant. You see the chairlift up there. That's a chairlift. And this is our restaurant. We have, when we started the business, Utah drinking laws wouldn't allow us to serve alcohol to the people that come by. If you can't serve alcohol, it's kind of hard to sell your product. And so we said, well, can we have a bar? And they said, sure, we can have a bar. So we want to have a bar, and they said, but you have to have food. We thought we didn't want peanuts. So we hired a really good chef, and he just got a James Beard nomination last year. And so we have a very, very good restaurant, and we make whiskey. So it's a fun job. And we are the world's only, when I started this, they said, you need to be the world's only something. And that's good marketing. So we're the world's only ski and gastro distillery. So it's a mouthful, but that's us, and you can see the people skiing in. We're downtown. Park City's a mining town. But we are building a new place because we ran out of capacity, which is good. We are building the world's only distillery, deuterant, spa retreat outside of town. It's out of town it's a 4,000-acre working cattle ranch, and we're going to feed our sorry.
It's a spa retreat.
What? Oh, yeah, fair enough. Okay. I was really testing to see how drunk you were. But you can see what's happening here. These are juniper trees, but there's more aspen and stuff there. But we're opening that next summer, and we'll have 4 pot stills in the one building there. And we're really ramping up our whiskey because that was the game plan. So, but anyway, and before we get into the science, has anybody ever seen a meeting? This is an MEME. You go on Google, and they have one for every job. Every of your jobs in here. And this explains my job. And when you guys, I'll let you read through this, but when my wife looked at this, she said, yeah, the girls are better looking when you're out partying. So, but this is my favorite. But I am on a mission from God. I quit my job at a company called Genentech, and before that Amgen, and I started life as a biochemist. And I love chemistry, I love to cook, and my wife and I went to a wedding, my cousin's wedding in Cincinnati. We said, let's go to Kentucky and visit a distillery. We were living in Napa, or close to Napa at the time. We loved wine, and let's go to the distillery. Little did we know, they're a long way from anywhere. And we went to Maker's Mark, and that's where the light bulb went off for me. I said, this is what I want to do, and I haven't looked back. But this is the life of a whiskey ambassador, and that is the truth on the bottom right. That's what happens most of the time. Okay, but the title of the seminar is Art of Science, and what the heck does that mean? What is it? Is it art or science? Do you know? What is whiskey? Oh, I did. You're right ahead. Well, science and whiskey. We think science really started with whiskey. Has anybody ever drank Old Crow? Yeah. It's not what we call the greatest whiskey today, but back in the day, it was the greatest whiskey. And it was named after a guy, Dr. James Crow. And if you know Woodford Reserve, they're made at a plant called LeBron Graham, and that's where he worked. And he was the first guy to apply scientific principles of whiskey making. What are those? Talk about those here. Well, they're using instruments to measure things so you can make stuff consistently. He was the first guy to use this thing on the upper left. That's a saccharometer. It measures sugar. The bottom left is a pH meter. He didn't have that, but they did have litmus paper at the time, so you can measure pH. And that was very, very important in the world of whiskey. Does anybody know what the bottom right is? Hydrometer. That measures the solution when you have alcohol and water. The alcohol's lighter than water, and that thing floats, and there's a scale on it. That measures the percent alcohol in your whatever you're making, whiskey or whatever. We'll get to that later. And this is what is science? So this is a guy, and this is a scientist in the whiskey lab a long time ago. But what did they use a long time ago? Well, they had an ancient data analyzer right up here, and it still works. And right now, when we started our company, we couldn't afford a mass spectrometer and a gas chromatograph. We had this, and then your tongue and your nose are the most important things. And at the end of the day, what's the difference between science and art? It's what you like. Art is what you like, and art is measured by this and this. And so we're going to taste these things and tell us if it's art or science. Okay, so we're going to smell. And What am I, chopped liver? I didn't get any glasses. Okay, well, I'll just have to do mine. Okay, you guys have 6 glasses for you. We're going to smell them first. I don't want you to taste them yet. And don't look at the bottles I'm pouring here. We'll do it later. I'll do it later. Okay. You're gonna be smelling some whiskeys. And in the front, you have white whiskeys. I'm going to do this one for fun, so you don't know what order they're in. And when you guys smell whiskey, here's what I do with any spirit. I don't do it now. I don't put ice in it. I don't put Coke in it. But I like whiskey with all those. But when I first enjoy or appreciate something, I want to do it neat. And wine and whiskey are different. Wine drinkers do this. I don't want you to do that. And they go. And this is 40% alcohol. Wine is 15%. 40% alcohol anesthetizes your nose. You can't smell in your nose. This is anesthetized. So open your mouth. Breathe in through your mouth and then breathe in through your nose at the same time. It's like chewing walking gum. But if you do that, it dilutes down the 40% vapors to 20% because it cuts in half. And you actually enhance your ability to smell. So I want you to smell all these first before you taste them. I mean, you can taste them, I don't care, but if you can hold out, try to hold out. But when you smell these, and just do them in order. And the mind works very well when you do comparative smell. It's very hard to smell something yesterday and smell something tomorrow and compare them. If you do them side by side, you can learn a lot. And why do we smell these things? Your nose can smell. Does anybody know how many things you can smell? Am I yelling too loud?
No.
Okay. How many things can you smell? Wait, who said not as much as a dog? You're close. Who said 10,000? You can smell upwards of 12,000. Not everybody can do that. It's like running a marathon. Everyone in here can train for a marathon, but you got to train for it. And you got to train your nose. When I started the job, I wasn't that good at smelling things. And now I'm getting a lot better. But on that first thing, does anybody have a smell they smell in that? Can I suggest something? Will that help? Marshmallows. Does anybody smell marshmallows? This is. Huh?
No.
You don't smell marshmallows? How about saltwater tack? Vanilla? Does anybody smell vanilla? Okay, so there's the first 3 things on the front are clear. Does anybody know why they're clear? They've never been in wood. They're unaged. We'll talk about that. But everybody's heard of Blanco tequila? Añejo tequila. Everybody thinks of whiskey as añejo. The white things are just Blanco. They've not been in wood. So color comes from wood. But on these things, I wanted you to smell. We're gonna click through here. Is there anything in those that you liked? Who liked number 1? Who liked number 2? 3? Did you like number 3? Wow, okay. So there's no account for taste. Everybody loves different things. Your definition of art's going to be different than mine. So whiskey is what? Does anybody know? It's a trick question.
Grain and water.
Yeah, whiskey comes from grain. Brandy comes from
Grapes.
fruit. You can have pear brandy, apple brandy. Okay, whiskey comes from grains. Anybody know what the grain is on the bottom left? Rye. Oak roads, corn, barley. Whiskey is beer. We first make beer, we ferment it, and when we distill it, we get beer. I just like the picture, so. Okay. So Whiskey 101, so you guys can ask me questions. There's some simple stuff for, a lot of people might know this, a lot of people might not. Just shoot questions at me. We can make every slide hard if you want. This one's easy. 5 steps of whiskey, you mill it. We're going to talk through these here. Okay, mill, what does that mean? We have that grain. We want to convert it to flour because we want to access the starch in that flour. And we used to have a roller mill. This is a hammer mill. We have a hammer mill now. And our roller mill, we couldn't crush the grain tight enough, so we would have a lot of grain that went to waste. We didn't convert it to alcohol. It's called poor yield. So we switched to hammer mill. But basically, it just pounds the grain into flour. And you can access that flour. What do you do with flour? Well, and flavor source. So you have 3 different whiskeys in the front row. Closest to me, and they're from 3 different grains. Anyone guess what they are? What is one?
Oats.
So one clever guy says oats, right on. One of them is oats. Which one is oats?
That's a good question.
And what are the other 2? Do you may know? We showed them to you in the picture.
Rye.
One is rye, but I'm not. Number 1 is rye. One of them might be rye. Yeah. One of them is definitely rye.
Barley.
One of them is not barley. One is corn. Okay, so maybe, should I tell you what order they're in?
Corn is 3.
Oh, right corn. That's right. So the first one's oat, the second one's rye, third one's corn. They're all distilled very differently too. That'll affect the flavor a lot, it'll affect the smell a lot. But you get different smells from these grains and they affect what you want to come out with. We made a whiskey out of oats because we thought oats were delicious. Who eats oats for breakfast? Raise your hand. Come on, who eats oats for breakfast? Right? Who eats grits for breakfast? Okay. Who eats rye for breakfast? Nah, it's going to be the Swedish. The Swedish is rye. Okay, so now we're going to taste. We're going to taste. Just the three white ones, not the dark ones, okay? And so how many things can your tongue taste? Wait, no. Not 5. Name them, buddy.
Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami.
Umami. Does anybody even know what umami is?
Savory.
Savory, yeah, like a very short with thyme, rosemary, or something. There's actually 2 other tastes. We used to have a chef that cooked for us who's from India. He said, no, there's 7 tastes. Because in India, that's their tradition. There's 2 other tastes. Who's ever eaten a hot chili pepper? Tell me that's not a taste. Is that one of the sweet, salty, sour, bitter umamis? No. Chili pepper actually hits a different nerve pathway that signals pain and heat. Now, it's a different nerve. So they don't call that a taste in the Western tradition, but in Indian cooking tradition, they do. And there's another one, tannic. You've ever had a young Bordeaux? That's a different nerve pathway. It's not a taste pathway, it's a different nerve pathway. Anyway, okay. So we're going to taste those whites. You guys taste them yet? Okay, taste those. And when I taste and just talk a little bit about it, I think of an eyedropper. It's like 3 eyedrops on my tongue. I don't want to dunk it. I don't want to overwhelm my tongue. I want the taste to roll around on my tongue. And because you're tasting 40 proof spirits, which is high, you can add water if you want. But think of, I get marshmallows and saltwater taffy when I taste oats and vanilla. When we started the company, we didn't start the company to sell Blanco whiskey. How many people buy Blanco whiskey? A lot more today than when we started, which is amazing. But aged Añejo whiskey is much better, but Blanco whiskey is not better. It's kind of tasty. We'll talk about moonshine later on if you guys want. Okay, did you guys taste the rye, the middle one? The middle one, the first one's 80 proof. The second 2 are 100 proof. And why are they 100 proof? The rye is one we made, the corn is not one we made. The rye, I like high proof white lager. I love the flavor of it. It tastes like plums. I get the Christmas fruit cake in a can that you get from Texas? It tastes like that. You get dried plums and rye grain and spices and flavors. And we're going to talk about how we made these because they're very different distillation styles. How about the last one? Did you taste the last one yet? Actually, the rye, I have to confess, it's not 100 proof, it's 98.6 proof. Does anybody know what 98.6 is? So it goes in smooth. So, yeah, it's a chemist joke. Okay, so corn. Did you taste the corn? You taste the corn? Who liked oat the best? Who liked the rye the best? Good. Who liked the corn the best? Weirdos. No, so again, there's no account for taste. I mean, they're all nice spirits. The corn is,
It's oily.
it is oily. It's called Georgia Moon. This stuff is nasty. It's in the mason jar. But it's actually kind of nice when you taste it in this context. It's educational. It's not so nasty. But if you drink it to enjoy, it's kind of nasty. Okay, so that's taste. Okay, so what's happening? So we ground and grain that corn, that rye, and you have that starch. We want to access that starch. We want to turn starch into sugar because yeast eat sugar. They don't eat starch. And so when they eat sugar, something very magical happens, which is wonderful. But there are these heroes in the world of human beings. They're enzymes. And we would not be drunk if we're not for these enzymes. Well, we would. We'd be drunk off of wine. But you need these enzymes to convert starch to sugar. And when they convert starch to sugar, and they do it very scientifically, they do it at a very specific pH, and they do it at a very specific temperature. And it took humankind a long time to find that out. But actually, we found it out. If you guys look on your tasting map, upper right-hand corner, there's a picture. And that's the earliest known picture of 2 humans sharing a drink. And it's from Mesopotamia. So, my friends, we've been sharing drinks together a long, long time. This is 4,000 BC. So, man and woman discovered fermentation 4,000 BC, and the theory is, there's a guy, Yu Penn, has a theory that man and woman settled down in civilizations when we discovered fermentation. So, civilization begins with fermentation. It's just awesome to think about, because you couldn't grow grain and be nomadic. You had to stay in one place. So those are the heroes. But what happens? Those heroes break that starch into sugar. They cleave those bonds, and we have that sugar. We throw yeast in. Yeast eat sugar, and they're just like men and women. Yeast fart carbon dioxide, and they eat ethanol. And so you get 2 ethanols and 2 carbon dioxides from every sugar, and that's the foundation of human society. And this is yeast. We actually grow our own yeast at the High West. We grow them on these agar plates, and your goal is to get a colony, so you spread these things out. And but the flavors from yeast are wonderful. And in the rye, the middle one is actually 3 different white blocks from 3 different yeasts. Same mash bill, but we made 3 different beers and distilled them, added them together, kind of like Four Roses, if you guys know Four Roses. One yeast is spicy. It's actually a Trappist beer yeast, so it has all those wonderful spices. One yeast is tastes like cherries, and one yeast tastes like double bubble gum. This is wonderful fruits in it. And we mix those together to create this complex, so we're aging it like that, and we can't wait to taste it aged. Hopefully you can either. It'll come out hopefully next year. It's our first aged spirit. Oh, Barbie doll heads. Oh, we'll get into that. Yeast also, so when you make a beer is one chemical, it's about 400 kilograms. Yeast convert that starch to carbon dioxide and ethanol. They also make fusel oils. Fusel oils are higher alcohols like propanol, butanol, with like 3 carbons, 4 carbons, 5 carbons. Methanol, which has 1 carbon. Methanol, ethyl acetate for your nail polish ladies. Yeast make ethyl acetate. They make all these amazing flavors. You can control them. If you're scientific about it, you know how to ferment at the right temperature. You can reduce the Barbie doll heads. You will taste a lot of white dogs today that have tremendous Barbie doll heads. There's some of these. Barbie doll head, like when you open the package, it tastes like plastic. I mean, you don't lick it, you can smell it and stuff.
Is that based on the cut that they make up?
What?
Is that based on the cut that they make up?
Well, it's based on bad fermentation mostly, but it's also based on cuts when they cut things in dust. We're going to talk about that, I think, here. Another flavor source is bacteria. Bacteria everywhere. Yeast. You have yeast all over your body right now. You have bacteria all over your body. Yeast is mold. If you see bread and turns green, it's yeast. They're everywhere. They do wonderful things for us. Bacteria do too. They occur naturally in the grain, and some grain that we might get might be loaded with bacteria. And we'll get a spike in one scientific variable called acidity, and it can make it taste bad, sour. But it also adds some spice and fruit, and the control of the bacteria really adds some complexity of your whiskey. This is another shot of, that's actually yeast, it's not bacteria. So, and they're budding, they're multiplying. Okay, flavor source fermentation style. So in Scotland, has anybody been to Scotland? Did you go to distilleries? Right, I'm just right.
Why else would you go?
Well, I mean, I don't golf, but some people go for that. They prefer rain, things like that. Food can be good. But in Scotland, they have a style of distilling where they filter out the grain. See a picture of that. This is Jack Daniels. Has anybody been to Jack Daniels? You guys are really close. You really ought to go. It's a great, great trip. You can see the corn in there. And that's we leave the grain when we make the beer. And in Scotland, they have this thing called a lauter tun. And that's what they do at breweries here. It's a filter, and they filter the grains out. So then when you ferment the beer, the yeast create different flavors when that yeast is in there. And then when you have that beer, what do we do with it? Well, we want to separate the water from the ethanol and those other 300 chemicals, and we use these things called stills. They're just big boiling devices. That's all they do. Does anybody know what distills are? They're pastas, but what distillery are they? They're very distinctive stills from one distinct distillery. What? Glenmorangie. It's Morangi, it's like orange. Yeah. Anyway, they're from Glen. They're the tall, skinny ones, and their tables up front. They make great whiskeys. So we have to separate the water from ethanol. How do we do that? Does anybody here know? Who's got a watch by what time is it? 37. What time is this over? Because I could talk all night, and I got to go. Is it over at 9? 9:10? Okay. How do we separate the water from ethanol? Does anybody know here? What? What? Heat? Well, yes, but there's a chemical principle that you use heat to get to. What is that chemical principle? Boiling point. Everything has a different boiling point. What does water boil at? 212. What does water boil at in Park City? What's your favorite color? What? Altitude higher, so it boils lower, so 212, somebody said 212. In Park City, it's, come on, make a guess. Close. 199. So when you go up to Park City, when you guys come and visit us, and you rent a place and you're going to cook a pot roast, it's going to take you shorter or longer to cook it? Longer. So when you cook stuff, you're limited on cooking by boiling point of water. So if you're braising or something, if it's braising at 212, it's going to cook faster. If it's braising at 199, it takes longer. It takes about 10% longer. So remember that when you come visit us. Okay, ethanol boils at what? 173, lower than water. And what's it boil at in Park City? 160. So when we put the beer in this still, and we use heat, that some clever man said, we heat it up, and it starts to bubble at about 158. And you know that water doesn't bubble at 158. Methanol bubbles at 158. So methanol isn't always, it bubbles or lifts, and it comes out as steam, and the water stays behind. So we use a simple chemical principle of boiling point to separate out the components. We want the volatile components because we don't want the drunk one, we don't want the water. So we use distillation. Does anybody know where the word distillation comes from? Who speaks Latin? Nobody. Distillation comes from the word distillare, meaning drip. In the first stills, they would boil the alcohol off, and it would drip out. Distillare drip. Okay, so then there's a distillation style, and this is the biggest area where I'm most pissed off at the whole whiskey industry, because they don't tell you this stuff. We drink a lot of whiskeys out here, Canadian, American, and no one really knows what the difference is. What's the difference between Scotch, grain whiskey, blended whiskey? This sort of forms the foundation of the difference. We can boil that alcohol, we can boil the heck out of it, and purify the heck out of it, we get GNS. GNS is grain neutral spirits, otherwise known as, you know the V word? Vodka. So basically, 90% ABV, alcohol by volume, ethanol. You're separating out 300 chemicals. There's 300 chemicals in that beer, right? You want one chemical, ethanol. When you separate out 95%, you have the rest is 5% water and some trace chemicals, congeners. There's another style of distillate in the United States. It's called light whiskey. In Scotland, it's called grain whiskey. It's distilled to 80, 95% ABV, or 160 to, what's 95 times 2? Yeah, 190. So 160 to 190. If you distill it that clean, so the first whiskey that you tasted, the white one, was a light whiskey. We didn't bring vodka. The second two whiskeys were straight whiskeys. They were still very low proof, and so they keep all the chemicals that the yeast make. The congeners. Congeners, Latin, born with. It's born with ethanol. So there's ethyl acetate, methanol, fusel oils, which are propanol, butanol, things like that. Straight whiskey basically keep all those things in it. And so the two whiskeys, number 2, number 3, were much heavier than number 1. Number 1's light, easy drinking. And if we had vodka, and everybody had vodka, it tastes like, not much. And so we don't start a company to make vodka because it's not very artistic. You're just brute forcing, separating everything but ethanol. We start a company to make whiskey because there's all these other flavors in it, and that's what drives passion. They don't write songs about vodka in the West. So you drank straight line whiskeys, and let's talk about that. So this is a curve. Is anybody scientific in here? Is everybody okay with curves and graphs and stuff? So on this axis is proof. This axis is time, and this is a graph of our distillation that we do at High West, or anybody does. And this is a pot distillation, not a column distillation, that they do in Kentucky. And the light whiskeys, we run it up very high, and we put all these plates on our still, and I wish I had a picture, I didn't bring one. But we try to distill at very high proof, and then we do the sink for cutting ends and edge. So the first few minutes is the fingernail polish remover and the methanol that lines, and we cut that out, and we throw it away. And then it starts to taste really, really good, that's the heart. And then it starts to taste like Barbie doll heads and rubber bands and like nasty things. And we separate those out from the light whiskey. But in the straight whiskey, we actually do it lower proof. The still is a filter, and we filter it less. And we take a wider head, as the tail's kept moving around. And so all the flavor in the glass 2 and glass 3 is because we took a wider head, the tail's kept. And so that's important for you guys to know what you're tasting. Okay, so heads, methanol, acetaldehyde, acetone. Methanol, you guys know about going blind when you drink methanol? It's if you drink a lot, and if you go to the hospital and you're blind from ethanol, what do they do? You know? They give you ethanol. It's a USP grade of vodka, but they dose you up with ethanol. Actually, preferentially pushes out ethanol from your eyeball receptors. It's okay, but if you go for like a couple weeks, you will go blind. But no one's gone blind in a long time. Acetone. So there are all these things. You know, but some of these things you want in your whiskey because things at a high concentration taste nasty. Things at a low concentration add character and interest. Think of sulfur. A lot of the Scotch whiskeys out there are loaded with sulfur. Very little amount. And sulfur in a big amount tastes like what? Rotten eggs. Yeah. You like rotten eggs, by the way. But in a little amount, it adds character and interest. You want those in whiskey, and they are in every whiskey. You just don't know it necessarily. Fusel alcohols, alloys, barbital heads, they cloud up the whiskeys. Anybody ever heard of chill filtering? Yeah. Our whiskey's not chill filtering. Ours is. One of the reasons ours is that when we started the company, the equipment cost about $30,000. And I couldn't afford that, so we just said, we're not going to chill filter. We'll just tell people about it. Chill filtering's not a bad thing. So what you can do is you can take this and you can cool it down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Oils, does anybody have a bottle of palm oil vinegar dressing in their fridge? You've heard of palm oil. It's got the good profits. So what happens when you put the oil and vinegar in your fridge? What happens to oil? Well, it separates the hardens. So if we cool this down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very cold, the oil hardens. It's separated here. You can see it's cloudy. But it hardens when we run it through the filter. And on the other side comes clean, clear spirit. It never clouds. This is chill days. And we chill filter that out. Some companies do. We don't. And the reason we don't, one, is because it's expensive. Two, because oils have flavor. Everybody spent more than $20 on a bottle of olive oil once in their life, right? And you did it because of the flavor. For totally cheap, $5. It doesn't taste the same as $25 California Napa expensive olive oil. So oils have flavors. And when you're a whiskey drinker, you're drinking whiskey and you're not drinking vodka because of the flavor. And when you drink whiskey, do you want the flavor to go right away, or do you want it to hang out and you want to enjoy it? So oils cloy in your mouth, they stick. So I can nurse a whiskey for half an hour, a little whiskey, because the flavor sticks around. That's what I enjoy. You probably do too. So look for whiskeys that aren't chill filtered. Easy enough. Okay, so one of the whiskeys you had tonight was our silver whiskey, Western Oak. It's got a little barley malt in it. Somebody said that. It's a light whiskey. We cut our tails. It's proof to 80. It's got some nice points. We always have a Hollywood star cowboy that we name our whiskeys after. And you're not going to guess on this one. I'm just going to tell you. Grace Kelly. And she's a great cowboy. We consider our oak whiskey a beautiful, beautiful, pretty whiskey. Let's talk about the next one. The OMG Pure Rye. Does anybody know what OMG stands for? Old Monongahela. So American Rye whiskey was our whiskey before bourbon was, and our whiskey industry was Western Pennsylvania. Everybody knows Three Rivers State. What are Three Rivers?
Monongahela is one of them. Ohio's the other.
Monongahela, Allegheny, Ohio. So Monongahela, there were about 300 whiskey distilleries in Monongahela. Our first Civil War was about what? Whiskey, not slavery. 1794, there was the Whiskey Rebellion. These guys were making whiskey. This is our recreation of what their whiskey is, what they would have made back then, the flavor, the style, and that's what they drank back then. And it probably was not aged. And the cowboy is Charles Bronson. It's a big, bold whiskey. Okay, now let's talk about maturation. Get to the fun whiskeys. What time are we at? Like 5 minutes. I've 4 hours of stuff to say in 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, so then we stick this stuff in a barrel. Why do we do it in a barrel? So those guys in Monongahela, they shipped their stuff down the rivers. By the time it got to New Orleans, it had been in a barrel for a long time. They shipped it over the mountains to D.C. And people started drinking aged whiskey, we think, we're not really sure, because just getting it to market. And it might have been 3 months old. But Old Monongahela was the first whiskey that was really aged. And even though we call it white man OMG, we just drink it for fun. Anyway, there's a lot of things that go on in whiskey. You extract flavors from the wood, so the barrel's like a tea bag. And if you use a tea bag the first time, your tea is really intense and strong. Use a tea bag the second time, what happens? Some people throw their tea bags away the second time. The barrel's the same. In bourbon, we use the barrel one time. Rye, we use the barrel one time. Well, for the most part. And then we get rid of the barrels, we send them to Scotland, Ireland, Canada. They reuse the barrel sometimes. We had a whiskey, we don't have it anymore, where we had It was second fill barrel is a very soft, delicate whiskey because of the second use barrel. So there's less stuff to extract. Okay, what do we got here? And then here's the stage, and they light these things on fire, and they char them. These are the world's first charcoal filters. If you guys have charcoal filters on your sinks, charcoal filters absorb some that Barbie doll has actually out of the whiskey. Okay, so blending whiskey, the most misunderstood term in the world of whiskey. And this is where I really get irritated with the whiskey companies because they haven't done a great job explaining to you what does blend mean. There's different blends out there. It depends on what you're blending. And really, they're blending light times with straight times. And the light is that light whiskey or even vodka. And there's in Canada, Canadian whiskey basically is a heavy straight. It's generally about 10% of the blend, and then light. About 90% of Canadian whiskey is light whiskey. Light whiskey is distilled at 189 proof. Vodka is 190, so it's near vodka. And they do it at 189, so they don't have to call it vodka. They can call it whiskey, but that's what you're getting with Canadian whiskey. We came out with these next whiskeys. They're like a vat malt in Scotland, but here we don't have that term. In fact, in Scotland they don't have that term anymore because it's confusing. They come up on blends of malts, but we have blends of straights. And on the label, when we sold this stuff, it says blend of straight whiskey. People said, "Oh no, we buy blends. Blends are horrible." Well, Seagram's VO, Seagram's 7. Light whiskey with vodka, with straight whiskey, espresso, and you have a light whiskey. These are not light whiskeys, they're heavy whiskeys. We had to call them blends because the whiskeys came from two different distillers, and they're also two different straights, so it's like blending two espressos together. So okay, let's drink them. Do you guys smell them yet? So I'm not going to tell you what order they're in, but smell them first, right? Can you guys smell them? I mean, work with them here. So one is, you guys guess what they are. One is a rye, and two are kind of tricks. They're bogeys. And did anybody smell the last one? Smoky. Yeah. You didn't realize you're coming to a Scotch seminar. We love Scotch. We're making a Scotch. We can't call it Scotch. It's called malt whiskey in the United States. But when we dump our rye barrels, we're filling it with our malt whiskey because the Scotch drinker, and I agree, you like Scotch in a softer barrel profile. Anyway, you are tasting three blends in the upper right-hand corner. Blends of straight whiskeys distilled at that lower proof, heavier body things. And what are you tasting here? Why do we blend the whiskey? What is the point? Well, we didn't start a business to blend whiskeys that other people distill, but it sure helped make payroll. And we also found these beautiful whiskeys that no one had ever tasted because they blended them with GNS or light whiskey. These whiskeys went into Seagram's 7 and Seagram's VO. We plucked the rye out and sold them, and that's what rendezvous rye is, double rye. This heavier, beautiful, amazing whiskey no one ever had. And we got lucky. But we blended, the first one is a blend of a 16-year-old and a 6-year-old. And what happens? Create a more balanced whiskey, more complex whiskey. And Ronnie, we got a nice, well, one of them's Son of Blue Rye. So actually, which one's Son of Blue Rye? Do you guys know? I forgot what order it was. No, the middle one is not Son of Blue Rye. The middle one is, yeah. So the first one, you smell, it's a blend of bourbon and rye, and you smell sweetness. Candy corns, it's close to Halloween, so I can say candy corns and not gross you out. You smell like candy corns in there. Sweet corn. And that's from the bourbon. And then when you taste it, you get this spicy cinnamon red hots. It's close to Halloween.
The Barton whiskey was originally destined for Seagram's whiskeys?
Actually, Barton was owned by Hiram Walker, and it was destined for Canadian Club, and it would have been blended off in the miserable Canadian whiskey. Okay, so the first whiskey, and I kind of blew the, how much time do I have, Doug? I got 30 seconds? Okay, I'll wrap it up. Well, we have a cowboy, and this cowboy for Son of Blue Rye that's our neighbor, Bob. He lives in Sundance. Because it's hard not to like these cowboys. What else we got? Okay, the middle one, Rendezvous. That's a blend of two ryes, a 16 and 16. It tastes like Christmas to me. You get this allspice, nutmeg, clove, these beautiful Christmas malting spices in that. And so back to science and art. The art was, we went through about 30 to 60 different mixtures of these different whiskey components to come up with these. And you wouldn't believe the bottle shop. On Friday, you thought you had the answer. On Monday, you tasted it again, and it tasted completely different. Whiskey had an amazing bottle shop, and we had no idea. What else we got here? Okay, the cowboy for Ron. Everybody know this guy? Jeremiah Johnson. He's our neighbor that I mentioned. And then the last one, campfire. So my wife and I spent our 10-year anniversary on Isla. Isla's where they make Ardbeg, Bowmore, Brook Lottie. We stayed at the Brook Lottie Academy. If you guys have a chance to do it, it's a wonderful time. But that's where the inspiration for campfire was. One morning, we stayed at bed and breakfast and the ladies cooked. And they dumped a bottle of Freud and 2 cups of sugar. And we went in and we were smelling peat. It's like, you don't smell peat in the morning, it's very usual, it's pungent. We went in the kitchen and said, what are you guys doing, ladies? And they said, come back for dinner. We came back for dinner. They had reduced this to a simple syrup. A smoky simple syrup. Think about that. And for dessert, they poured it on ripe honey. And I thought it was the most beautiful desserts I'd ever had. And I thought, why not smoke with fruity bourbon, sweet bourbon? So we found a single malt scotch. It's not from Isla. And then we blended it in. And this was about 60 different recipes for the campfire and the cowboys. Everybody's favorite, Robert Duvall. That's it. Did you guys get to ask all the technical questions and stuff? I know I had to go fast.
What about the new barrels in the XO that you're doing?
Oh, so there's a question about campfire. Our first campfire we launched, it was the blend. And then, if anybody's ever had the Compass Box whiskey Flaming Heart, which is wonderful, it was an inspiration for me to explore use of French oak. And these barrels, French oak barrels for wine are about $1,000 a piece. And we bought a few of them. And French oak adds wonderful, wonderful clove and then mouthfeel. And so we aged campfire and used to add this big, thick mouthfeel to it.
And an uncharred new barrel?
It's uncharred, yeah. It's a wine barrel, not a whiskey barrel. So it's uncharred. It's toasted, but it adds just mouthfeel, clove, spice. And we just, pardon? It's a wine meant for wine, but it wasn't meant to be for wine. So,
Hungarian barrel is okay.
well, it started in American oak, but then we finished it in both Hungarian and French. So, because they had a different flavor profile. So that's all I have, but you guys turn in your names, and how much time do I have, Doug? Come on, since the first guy didn't go over, I can go over a little bit, right?
Where do we turn them in?
Right in this hat. Let's do it now. Then, do you guys want to collect up glasses? We can do it while we draw names and stuff? Just pass them to the sides. Pass them in the middle. No, that's much quicker, right? Pass them in the middle. Pass the cards in the middle. All right, then we'll do drawing. We have 2 drawings. This will only take 30 seconds. All right, bring it up. Bring it up. All right. Good job. Thank you. Couple more. Okay, so this is drawing for that little class. Get everybody? Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. I hope it wasn't too simple for everybody and stuff. And whiskey's such a complex subject. There's so much to share. Coming to these seminars a lot, you guys are going to learn. But there's a lot to learn that you're not being told by these guys. And, it's important. What's the first whiskey of our own that we're going to release? Well, we actually have these white ones. If you meant what's the first whiskey of our own that we're going to release, we've actually done these because we've blended them. And then our aged ones, we'll probably release one this Repeal Day. And if you guys know Repeal Day, there's a thing called Prohibition. Utah was actually the state that provided a critical linchpin vote in Prohibition. So we throw a big Repeal Day every year. Okay, so for the flask. Oh, it'd be fat. It's called Bag 10. Jean or Jean Gaffot? Jean or Jean? Jean. Okay. Do you want the hat or the flask? Okay, you got it. Pass it back. And then the next one's the hat. Oh, then everybody gets a booby prize. You got a little glass of chocolate. The chocolate's filled with ganache. The chocolate's made by a sweet Mormon lady. She will not touch alcohol, so she gives us the ganache. The chef has to mix the Ronnie with the ganache, and then she'll fill it. But it's got Ronnie in it, so I hope you guys are good. Okay, Jean, you got that. And then you got our sipping glass. And then Brian Hewitt. You get a hat. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. That's it. I'm getting kicked out, so thank you. All right.